MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode is here on set with me. Okay, there's so much here, I think, to me. And I asked you this before we got on set. I said, okay, I'm reading this, and how is this not a more fleshed out version of the ceasefire that is already in effect? And what you said to me is, well, this is basically a deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So in addition to it being that, which was open at the start of the war and just sort of gets us back to stasis, what else is actually in here tangibly already figured out?
Virtually nothing.
Okay.
And that's why this is such a victory and a surprise, really, for Iran. And it's actually reopening the strait on Iran's terms. There's still a possibility here for Iran to charge tolls, that it can take control of the strait, a power it has never had before. And that's what won the war for Iran. It was closing the strait. The most revealing statements, David Sanger said this in the New York Times, was Trump's statement, "I don't want to be Herbert Hoover." I had to check my history lessons.
Yeah. Take us through the annals. Yeah.
Well, I was, World War I and other things, but he essentially went down in history as causing and mishandling the Great Depression. And so the president's bravado through all these weeks that, we're winning and we're, bombing the hell out of them, beneath it, they used economic levers. They used shutting the Strait of Hormuz. They used a global energy crisis to win this war.
I also think when he says you can't cover everything in a document, it's something that, in real estate, you hear lawyers and deal makers there say. And of course, that makes sense given Trump's background. And yet you look at the reasons that it took so long to put together that 2015 Obama-era Iran deal, the JCPOA, and it's because you had experts poring over every word because the word choices matter. And I think in this document, what was so striking is the word choices when they talk about a cessation in hostilities, they also say in Lebanon. And that is such a key sticking point for the Israelis who feel that they are getting a bad deal here. And I wonder if you take those two words of in Lebanon, the ways that that can be problematic as they try to move forward with a whole other set of thorny issues on nuclear and missiles and proxy groups. But that specifically is a sticking point.
That's a sticking point. And again, that's a huge victory for Iran. Iran is saving. I mean, it's always wanted to be in the position of we are sort of, saving the Palestinians. We are the one country that can fight, Israel in the West. Mm-hmm. And they just did that. And if you look at just the position they were in on February 27th, the day before this war started, they were cowed. The previous supreme leader, who Israel and the U.S. killed, was afraid of a war with the U.S. and Israel at the same time. And they were weak. Their ballistic missiles hadn't really threatened Israel, and they just, were sort of didn't have this much leverage. So it's extraordinary. But the question is, yes, Lebanon could blow this whole thing up. Can Iran control Hezbollah and get Hezbollah to stop attacking Israel? And then another clear loser here politically is Bibi Netanyahu. Yeah. He's already being attacked from his right. I asked a bunch of experts, could Bibi blow this thing up? And the sense is he can complicate it. But even he can't fully break from the United States. But again, he pushed President Trump to do this. He predicted a street uprising. None of that happened. He's pushed American presidents for years. So this hurts him. It will hurt him, I think, in the Israeli election.
I think the other place where we're feeling some pain around this early memorandum of understanding is back on Capitol Hill, because President Trump is getting some pretty major pushback and criticism for this Iran deal from fellow Republicans and conservatives. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana posted on social media, writing, quote, "Reagan is rolling over in his grave. Iran's nuclear ambitions were not curbed, and they've learned that threatening the Strait of Hormuz works and will undoubtedly leverage it in the future. Now Iran gets to build brand new infrastructure under this deal." Cassidy continued, "Before the war, the strait was open. Iran was being crushed by sanctions, and 13 service members were still alive. Now 13 Americans are dead. Families have paid billions at the pump. Sanctions will be lifted, and the bombing has stopped. This is the worst foreign policy blunder in decades." Not mincing words. Here's then what the senator told The Hill yesterday.
The details that I've seen so far look awful. This will go down as a tremendous foreign policy blunder. Iran ends up stronger. Our allies in the region are weaker. And Iran has learned that if they're willing to grab that Strait of Hormuz and choke it off, they can get the Western world to dance to their tune. I think it's a deep mistake.
It's not just Cassidy either. Senator Ted Cruz blasted the plan to send billions to Iran, telling the Daily Wire, quote, "What's been released so far suggests that, unfortunately, the president is getting, I think, very poor advice when it comes to this deal," kind of a roundabout way of criticizing. That money, if it goes to the Ayatollah, will go to fund terrorists trying to kill Americans and weapons that will be used to try to kill Americans. And it also appears, he says, to formalize a permanent role for the Islamic regime controlling the Strait of Hormuz. It's difficult to see what possible benefit to America could come from that. And then there's current Fox News host and former South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy, who reacted to the agreement by saying this.
They're better off than they were before the hostilities began, and that should not be the consequence of war. When you lose a war, I mean, think about it, Sandra. We went into Iran and rescued a downed pilot. We had total control over that country. We were winning militarily and economically. And when you are in that position, you negotiate from strength. You don't give people money. You don't give them access. What are they going to do with the money? Iran is going to use this for nefarious purposes. We all know that. The regime has not changed. They're just richer.
And one more notable reaction. Right-wing commentator Ben Shapiro said this. Watch.
This MOU appears to be, just from the text, a disaster that does not achieve any of the actual signal goals that were set by the administration at the beginning. In my opinion, the Vice President of the United States, the chief negotiator on this particular project, has not well served the president.
So there's an interesting line emerging, right? They hate the deal, and they are saying that, but some of them are willing to not lay it at President Trump's feet, which is an instructive thing from what he said at the G7 yesterday, where he said, if it works out, this was all me, and if it doesn't, it's on my Vice President, J.D. Vance.
Yes, this is all not good for J.D. Vance, but I want to give credit, frankly, to all of those four Republicans for speaking out. We haven't always seen that from Republicans, and this is democracy, and Democrats need to do it, towards their own leaders as well. So that's a really healthy thing, but it's J.D. Vance who's in a terrible position here, and it's a pattern of the president not really thinking of the long-term future of the party and the potential nominee, and that. But what's interesting is that it is a sort of breaking point. The funniest comment was from Cruz, who sort of, doesn't quite go with the president, the classic Ted Cruz maneuver.
It's totally the president's deal, and also I think that whoever told him to make the deal is wrong.
It's their fault. I think this is a huge political problem for the president. He's going to try to talk his way around it. And even his statement, we're going to bomb them again. What will they do if we bomb them? Close the Strait of Hormuz. And we did bomb them. That was the entire strategy throughout the war, and it didn't work. A key moment, and I'm just nerding out here.
Please.
They launched this Project Freedom, which was an idea to take control. It was ships, but a ton of airplanes, like 100 drones and helicopters and planes in the air to get tankers through. And that was the moment. I spoke with one retired admiral about this, when the U.S. could have maybe won this war. It would be very dangerous and would take time. Iran has all that coastline. But Trump blinked. And the reports were that it was because Saudi Arabia didn't know about it and closed its airspace. But why did he stop then? Because if that was the moment when there was a way with our Navy, the most powerful one, our Air Force could have escorted tankers in and out of the strait, but he chose to halt then. And taco will be the joke. But, don't go to war unless you're willing to go fully to war. That's the lesson here.
And I think especially given the realities of the midterm elections and the prices rising at the pump, all of that very much seems to have been taken in totality for a president who lethality is always central when it comes to war and foreign policy and bombing. But at the same time, winning is pretty central to the calculus as well.
And I just want to call out one person, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, whose bravado, whose constant talk of 24/7 air control, as I've said, we had that for 20 years in Afghanistan, was false. And I don't think he served this president well.
And maybe that is ultimately when we start assigning blame, one of the places Republicans start to look. There's still a lot yet for us to see heading toward Friday when we're going to see Vance, I think, go and sign this deal. For now, we'll leave it there. MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode, excellent.
All right, everyone. I just watched a video discussing the political reactions to Trump's latest agreements with Iran, and the debate around it is getting pretty intense. According to the report, many Republican leaders are defending the agreement and describing it as a major victory for the United States. Several lawmakers argued that Iran is negotiating from a position of weakness, and that the deal shows American strength on the world stage. At the same time, critics are saying something completely different. They argue that agreement gives Iran significant benefits while receiving very little in return. Some opponents are even calling it a political surrender and questioning whether the administration achieved any of its original goals. What stood out to me is how divided the reactions are. Supporters believe the deal reduces the risk of a large conflict and creates an opportunity for further stability. Critics, however, claim that the agreement could strengthen Iran economically and politically in the long run. The video also highlights how different politicians are framing the same event in completely opposite ways. One side is calling it a historic success, while the other side sees it as a major strategic mistake. That's pretty common in politics, but the contrast here is especially dramatic. Personally, I think the real test will be what happens next. Political leaders can make all kinds of claims today, but the true impact of an agreement like this is usually minor, months or even years later. If tensions decrease and an agreement holds, supporters will claim victory. If problems continue, critics will say they were right all along. So what do you think? Is this a smart diplomatic move, or are other critics raising legitimate concerns? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this reaction video covering politics and current events, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on notifications for more updates. Thank you.